one of these last year, and I talked to Ollie about what I would do this year, and he actually came up with the title, The Art of Leadership. And I thought, well, what will I speak about? Leadership's a huge topic of which I'm pretty passionate about and find it absolutely fascinating because really, an art is absolutely the right term here. I think it's not a science. Um, it's all about people. So I thought what I'd do is I'd bring together my thoughts, which come from a whole jumble of thoughts, which are going into a book I'm going to write. I've written one book, The Leadership Map, which is a fairly kind of foolproof guide, I think, to running a business. But I want to now go into more leaders themselves. I'm a great fan of reading biographies of leaders and autobiographies of leaders, but also I spend my time at the moment. I coach and mentor about 40 leaders. About 20 plus of them are CEOs of SMEs from 3 to 70, 80 million. And in the past, I've worked with big corporates like Toyota and Lexus and BP and so on. So I've met the guys who run the big businesses, and I've read about the guys who run the global businesses, and I work with the guys who run SMEs and startups and scale ups. And so the contention I have is that actually there's no difference. If you're running a big corporate, or were like Bob Iger, who ran Disney for 15 years, or you're Don Gaynor, a good friend of mine who runs Team Sport Go-Karting, who started it when there were 5 tracks in Guildford. The principles are the same. They're really, really, really similar. And those principles are the things I'm going to share a few of today. So there are 7 main principles I'm going to work with in my new book, and I'm just going to share 3 of them with you today. So I'm going to share these 3. Evolving strategy, awesome team, and unshakable culture. There are 4 others, as I've said, which I won't talk about. And probably as I write it, to be honest, we could end up with 8 or 9 or 10, or we could end up with 5. So, but these are 3 that I think are absolutely key. The evolving strategy is, as people will tell you in business, you need a strategy, and you need to know where you're going, and you need to link that to your vision, and you need a business plan coming out of that strategy. But it shouldn't really be set in concrete because things change, and you have to keep looking in the mirror, and you have to keep looking around you. So you have to keep adjusting it accordingly without being chaotic, because of course everyone else will get thrown off their scent if that happens. Oh, by the way, I did say with Ollie, if you want to throw in a question at any time, don't wait for me to finish this talk. I'll ramble on for 25 to 30 minutes, but just cut me down, shout out something. If you've got a question, please do. So evolving strategy, absolutely crucial. And I'll give you some examples of that. Awesome team. I think, I was just speaking to a CEO I coach in Malaysia before I got on this call, and we were talking about his team. And it's the thing I think is probably the one main thing you've got to get right in any business, any startup, any scale up, any big, medium-sized SME, whatever you're doing, it's that team. Can you look at them in the face, and are they the right people around you? Have they got the skills? So I'll talk a bit about that. And then unshakable culture. I think this is the piece that differentiates you. This is the piece that keeps people with you. This is the piece that attracts people to you. So I do believe you've got to create something, and you can, built around your values, built around your beliefs, that makes you unique in the way you operate. And I think that's absolutely clear for SMEs, for startups, for scale-ups, for SMEs, for corporates. Doesn't matter who you look at, they've got an unshakable culture. The great ones have. So let's get into these and open it up a little bit. I'll start with Disney, and then I'll go on to an SME. This is Bob Iger. I don't know if anyone's read the book, The Ride of a Lifetime. Anyone read Ride of a Lifetime? Yeah, Ollie has. Anyone else on the other page? No. Okay, brilliant book. If you want a book on an amazing leader, read Bob Iger's Ride of a Lifetime. He spent virtually all his career in Disney or Disney companies and ended up as the CEO. And he spent a lot of time as COO looking at the previous CEO, Michael Eisner, who's stayed there for probably a bit too long, I think. And he bided his time and he took over in 2005 and he was CEO through to about 2020. And when he came into taking over the reins in 2005, he came up with just 3 strategic priorities. And you know, I think this is a great example for anyone in running a business. Don't overcomplicate stuff. Keep it really clear for yourself, for your team, for your business, and shout about what you're doing. Make it very clear, make it very open, make it very transparent. And these were the 3 things he said we're going to do. We're going to focus on high quality branded content, we're going to embrace technology, and we're going to become truly global. And you could say, well, in 2005, weren't they doing all these things? Well, things were slipping actually. High quality branded content, if they looked at the films they're putting out, the animations they're putting out, Pixar, who was their partner and had been for a few years, where Bob Iger had a great friendship with Steve Jobs, who was in Pixar, of course, as well as Apple. They started doing some good stuff together. But what he realized was Pixar's animation studio was way better than Disney's. So there was a problem they had with branded content. Technology was moving rapidly 2005. If you look at what was released in 2005, a whole lot of amazing technologies, and Disney were falling a bit behind there. And truly global, well, they only had parks in certain parts of the world. They hadn't really gone into the Far East, for example, so they wanted to become truly global. So he put these up there, said this is what we're going to do, we're going to put our plans underneath those. And let me show you how that plays out, because obviously it's no good just having 3 strategic priorities. You need to then say, well, what does that look like as plans? And obviously they had a huge number of plans. You know, I don't know what they all were, but these are the ones that Bob talks about in his book, and you can find if you Google them. What he did straight away within his first 6 months was he went, spoke to Steve Jobs, and he bought Pixar. I think it cost them just under 8 billion, so these were big numbers they were playing with. But it's funny when I talk to SMEs and I work with SMEs when they're doing acquisitions and selling parts of their business. It always amazes me how they can take a year and a half to go through the sale of a business worth 10 million. And the Pixar deal was done in about 3 months, which is quite extraordinary, isn't it, at that level? But he bought Pixar and he didn't bugger about with the brand. He left the brand. Pixar still exists. If you go and see a film that Pixar basically did, Pixar is still on that film. People still know the Pixar brand. So one of the mistakes, of course, in acquisitions is we bring it all in and we squash the entrepreneur, the creativity of that original brand. So anyway, kept that, brilliant. Did the same with Marvel. Brought Marvel franchise in, which was incredible, and they've made huge number of films from that. I know my 2 daughters are all over all the Marvel films. Went to see George Lucas. Bought the Star Wars franchise, Lucasfilms, and then 21st Century Fox, and indeed National Geographic as well, which isn't on this list. So he completely transformed Disney in that way, and all the plans under high quality branded content. Embrace technology, well, he did a huge number of things in there, but I suppose the biggest thing to share with you there is they created this online streaming service, Disney Plus, which, you know, I'm sure you or your children or people you know will have Disney Plus. It was only recently Disney Plus overtook Netflix with the amount of subscribers they've got. So incredible. Again, Disney's gone from strength to strength there. And a US streaming service, which they also created, called Hulu. And then on the global thing, they created new parks in Hong Kong, Shanghai. They're now in 40 countries. And they're up to 175,000, probably more than that now, as they call them cast members. I love the way Disney talk. They don't talk about employees, they talk about cast members. And they don't talk about customers, they talk about guests. And I think language is so important to our businesses, and I love the way they do that. But let me give you another piece of the puzzle for Disney. See on the slide now, I've put Disney's purpose on there and also Disney's vision. And the purpose I absolutely love. And I think for all SMEs, for all startups, what's your big idea? What is your purpose? Why'd you get out of bed in the morning? And I love short, sharp things like this. And for a huge company, creating happiness is a fantastic purpose. That's what they're doing when you go and see a Marvel film or go into a Disney park. They want to create happiness for you. That's what they're all about. And on the whole, I think they do it pretty well. The vision's interesting because you could look at this and say, well, that's a bit humble, isn't it? To be one of, I mean, these days everyone wants to be the greatest, the best. But maybe that's a bit of Bob Iger in there, who you read about him, and people say he is quite a humble person, and I suppose it's authentic, isn't it, to be one of the world's leading producers and providers of entertainment information. But we do need a vision. We do need something that tells us where we're going to go and what we're going to be in the future. So I put this together in one slide. So here you can see, a purpose, why we get out of bed in the morning, where we're going to be, the vision, 3 top strategic priorities, very clear, very simple, they can last over time, and then start breaking down the plans and then sharing it with all your people. So I thought that would be an interesting way to start the call. If I go on to the next one, you'll see an SME here called Team Sport. As I've said, Team Sport, actually, I live near Guildford, and Team Sport's first track was in Guildford, and then they closed it down because it was so grimy and grubby and horrible, they closed it down. But Team Sport started quite a long time ago now, and the current CEO was in sales there, and he took it over when they were about 3 tracks, I think. And those 3 tracks probably turned over $1 million and a bit, maybe 2 million if lucky, but a while ago now, about 20 years ago. And he's built this up from the ground up, and they're now 35 tracks across the UK, and they're in Germany. He's had investors along the way, but I take you to 2018 when they decided to change their strategic priorities. What they had done and what Dom had done is he'd wanted to build up, as you can see on the logo at the top, the #1 UK indoor karting business. And then they pretty much did that. And I used to sit down on my coaching stroke mentoring sessions with Dom and say, where are you going to take this business? We can do these big tracks where you've got like huge warehouses with a track in. You've got loads of room there, Dom. You could do other stuff. And he started employing people from different organizations, as you do, and he brought a guy in from Virgin Active. So he had a very interesting view and sort of a wider view of sort of leisure businesses. And it became clear they started dabbling in different sort of things they could do in their big warehouses, their big sheds really, and decided to move from being a go-karting business to a leisure brand. And I'll come on to what they did in a second. They also started to realise that actually they'd probably maxed out, or were starting to max out, the UK. They do a great deal of due diligence on where they might put a track. But really, there are only so many places you can put a go-kart track where you're going to get enough people. So they started looking internationally. And then they started to focus on culture. They've got 1,000 people now. How do you keep people? And I said this kind of keeping people is so important these days when it's an employees market. So what they did is let me just see if I've got another slide on that. Yes, I have. What they did on the leisure brand is they built a whole bunch of different brands, which they put in there. They've got a brand called Putt Club, which is indoor putting, which they realised is becoming very popular, and they gave it a go-karting theme. They've put virtual reality rooms in some of their big areas, and they are incredible. They put F1 simulators in there, so you can go along and drive a simulator as well as going on the track. They brought in an F&B manager from another company who had done this at a really high level because they realised their food and beverage really wasn't up to much. And then they've entered the British Indoor Karting Championships, which is now run, and they're moving to electric karts. So they're doing a huge amount around this. So they've gone from a go-kart business to a true leisure brand, and they're really building this up. And as somebody once said to me, if you call yourself a go-kart business, all the calls you're going to get are from people wanting go-karting. So be careful what you call yourself. Be careful what's on your website. Be careful what you say you are, because you could narrow your customer base too much if you're not careful. And whereas and also that goes for your senior leadership team, where your leadership team will sit around there. And if you say we're into go-karting, the conversations around the table will be all about go-karting. If you say we're a leisure brand, suddenly you allow a lot wider series of conversations to take place. You can go too wide, of course, so be careful on that too. But exploit what you've got, exploit your core competences, and think about how you can widen these out. To grow internationally, they're now looking at, by the end of this year, I think they'll have 3 tracks in Germany. They've realised they've got a great model. They can kind of, a bit like McDonald's in a way, not to devalue them. It's a cookie cutter approach. If you can open a McDonald's in Guildford, you could open one in Woking. It's the same kind of thing you're doing. You just have a model that you roll out. Slightly different in Germany, of course, different laws, different customer groups and so on, but absolutely a great place to go. They love motorsport, of course, and thinking of going to Holland after that. Focus on culture. As I said, they've got 1,000 people. They pay above the minimum wage. They paid furlough all the way through, plus during COVID. I couldn't believe how they kept people. The first day of COVID, if you can remember that far back, when Boris Johnson stood there and announced we're not going out, Dom made a video and sent it to everybody in the whole company saying, we're going to keep you all on as much money as we can give you. We're going to produce. We're going to keep. He said, I'm taking a 50% pay cut. My leadership team are going to be focusing on training and development. We're going to be giving you everything we can during this to keep you engaged. And they hardly lost anyone. And since then, they've hardly lost anyone. They developed their general managers, who are their stars massively, who run the go-kart tracks. And the one thing I think is lost sometimes in businesses these days is the massive part of leadership in, I put MBWA, management by walking about. And I'm sure people will remember that, Peter. You're nodding, and I think it's kind of undervalued, but it's so important. And Dom and his leadership team are on the road every week visiting tracks, and every track knows when Dom walks through the door in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt and his jacket with his Team Sport branded jacket. They know who Dom is, and even though there are 1,000 people, they know who he is. And I think you can't underestimate that FaceTime with the CEO and getting to ask him questions. And indeed, he has a weekly open session where he opens up on a Zoom call, and he says, and it's called Ask Dom. Very transparent, very open. Anyone comes on and says, Dom, what are we doing about this? Why haven't we done that? And he responds to it. And I think fantastic, transparency, openness, honesty from leadership. And he really has set the culture there. And if he's quite as he would describe himself, an internally referenced sort of guy. He doesn't go out looking for publicity. He hasn't done many articles or responded to press. But if he was to talk about team sport, I know culture would be right up there in trying to keep people engaged, because these people could go and get other jobs, especially at the moment, and he's got to keep them in there. So awesome team. A quicker one. I just want to give you 3 questions which I think are really important about top teams. Oops, just turned my notepad off. That's better. The 3 questions are you covering the 3 areas for success? Let me go back. Here we are. Right, the 3 areas for success. 87% of SMEs are founded by 3 people, are grown with 3 people. And there's a good reason for that. The 3 areas you need in any business to grow it successfully, in my opinion, and a lot of people have written about this as well, is you need a visionary. You need and that's usually the CEO, the founder. Often they've got an idea. They've got an idea, and they know where they want to take that idea. They're usually quite creative, and they're usually quite a shaper. If you were to look at sort of Belbin, they're an eagle. They want to take this business forward. But if you only have that type of person in your business, you're probably going to have too many ideas. It's going to be a bit chaotic, and it'll never work. You also need what Gino Wickman called in his book Rocket Fuel, which I put on there, is an implementer. You need somebody who's going to occasionally put the brake on and say, how are we actually going to do this? And the implementers often, in the bigger business, the COO. They're the person who just makes it all happen. And you'll know when I'm saying this thing where you naturally fit. You'll be saying, well, yeah, I'm more of the visionary, or I'm more of the implementer. And if you're more of the implementer, you might well need a visionary alongside you. If you're more of the visionary, you'll need the implementer alongside you. The third area I think every business needs is your numbers person. And obviously you need somebody for, the cash flow, the P&L and all those other things which you've got to have in place. These days, of course, you nearly always, if you learn about the people you need a technology person alongside you. And that technology person might be the implementer, might be the creative person, or might be a fourth, or it might be the numbers person. But technology these days, you can't. Virtually every business is a technology business these days. The second question I'd ask, once you've got your parts in place, or if you've got a gap there, where are they coming from, is, and this comes from Jim Collins, actually. I'm a massive fan of Jim Collins' work. And he says, if you look around your leadership team, and whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 of you, or whether it's 10 of you, have each of your top team learnt and grown in the last year? Are they a different version of themselves now than they were a year ago? Because if I was to say what differentiates really top CEOs, top directors from others, is they are constantly learning and growing. They are constantly on TED, they are constantly on podcasts, they're constantly reading books, they're constantly learning from others, they're constantly networking, and they're growing. And if you've got somebody around that table who's not doing any of that, I'd put a big question mark over their head. You've got to be learning and growing, and your people around you have got to be learning and growing. And the third one I put here is around role modeling, owning actions and delivering on them. If you're looking around that table again and somebody's not role modeling the behaviors, whether they're articulated clearly or not, then it won't work for you. So are people role modeling the behaviors you want in your business, or are they really challenging your culture? Are they owning what they're going to do? Are they accountable? And as somebody said to me the other day, accountability is ownership is voluntary, and accountability is voluntary. It comes from them. And are they taking actions? Are they an action person? So those are the bits under Awesome Team. Unshakable culture. Well, here's Steve Jobs, and I haven't gone and found all his the Apple values or anything like that. What I've done is, from all my knowledge and all the books I've read on this amazing man, I've just put together a whole bunch of things really, which you can read about Steve Jobs, and you can learn from other books that have talked about him. And I've been privileged to hear people who worked with him speak about him as well. And he certainly was a Steve Jobs version 1 and a Steve Jobs version 2 when he came back after he was sacked the first time and came back to Apple the second time. And these are some of the things about the unshakable culture, I think, that he built in Apple. And you could argue whether it's still there now or not under Tim Cook. Reality distortion field. A lot of people said Steve Jobs had this amazing ability to distort reality. And that comes from his massive belief and passion about things. And he'd say to people, I want this done in 3 days. And they'd say, it can't be done in 3 days, Steve. It takes a month. And somehow they'd do it in 3 days. And he had this ability just to challenge everything about how things worked and get things done in a different way. And people believed him. They got sucked in. He was quite mesmeric if you read the books around him. Stay hungry, stay foolish. That was his Stanford address. He said to people, be curious, have a journey, stay foolish, try new things. And I think that was part of their culture. seamlessly intuitive. I love this. This was so Steve Jobs' father was his adopted father was somebody who tinkered with engines and built things, and he said to Steve when he built a in his garden he built a fence, and he said to Steve, the back of the fence should look as beautiful as the front of the fence. And Steve took that on board when he went into Apple, and he was, you know, the first computer company, and they're not really a computer company, of course, to make things look beautiful, and that was all part of it. You know, the first company to put fonts into a computer because of his obsession with calligraphy when he went to college. So that's a fascinating thing. Don't ask what people want. I think that's an interesting thing for SMEs. You know, Jobs was famous for saying, let's find out what we can do and what we think people need, and what they'd really love. Because if we go out there and ask them, they won't know. And you know, if you can think of many examples like that, if you go to Dyson and say, did we really want a bagless vacuum cleaner? Almost said Hoover then, didn't I? Did we really want a bagless vacuum cleaner? No, Dyson produced one and we all wanted one. And it changed the industry. And I think that's what, you know, people were queuing around the block to get an iPad. They had no idea what an iPad did. And I think that's the beauty of this brand that he created. And he was very keen on, we've got some ideas here. We don't always have to take what people say they want. He challenged the status quo, we know that. And, you know, what's your ding you're going to put in the universe? He thought so big. A couple more. This is a guy I work with called Peter. And Peter runs MMRG. MMRG are a small SME in Guildford. And they create amazing, what they do is they take data off the internet and they give it to big pharmaceutical companies based on what they're looking for. So they might be looking for people who are experts in a certain field across the world, and they'll find who those experts are. And they're now putting it into an app where you can actually access it really easily. So they do quite a left-brained piece of business here. But Peter's very different. He's a lovely businessman. They've got 13 people, so they're quite small. And he's got a belief that he's going to build this business within the next 5 years to 10 million EBITDA. So that's quite a big, hairy, audacious goal. But I just love the way Peter thinks. This is off his website, and this is I worked a lot with him on refining this, I suppose. He wants to make a beautiful B Corp business. If those of you understand B Corps, and if any of you are trying to become a B Corp, it's a really interesting thing to do. Have a look at it on Google. It's basically a lot of it's in here and what he's said in these bullet points. We must be the change we seek in the world. They really want to challenge their customers. They want to be nice people. They want to do great things. He really believes in conducting business in the right way. No harm and benefit everyone. Their turnover of those 13 staff, who a lot of them are data scientists, is they just don't lose people. They just don't have any turnover of staff. It's extraordinary. And in 13, you'd think they would. And they realise that this is for the future. Peter's, won't mind me saying, he's about my age. He's early 60s, and got no intention of packing it all up. He just wants to see it grow and grow and grow and do great things in the world. And I think his passion is undiminished. He just wants to keep going. So those are the three things. Very quickly, obviously I could run a workshop on each of those that lasted a day. But I do believe you want to think about what your strategy is, make it as clear as crystal for everyone, have a plan that sits behind it, have a nice vision, have a purpose, why you get out of bed in the morning, and be nimble enough to think, where am I going to take that in the future? A bit like Disney did, a bit like Team Sport have done. Think about how you're going to evolve that and what the conversations are that flow from having a clear strategy. An awesome team. Ask those three questions of your team. Have you got the right people around you? Are they growing in the right way? And are they accountable, and do they take action? And the unshakable culture, I think this is the real differentiation for you. Whether you've got 3 people, 10 people, 20 people, you want to be 50 people, it's the reason people join, the reason people stay, the reason customers work for you, the reason partners work for you. I just think that has to be really robust. So I'll stop sharing. I'll share all the slides afterwards, and I hope that's been useful in some way.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's been wonderful. We've actually got a B Corp specialist coming in next month to talk to us, so we're looking forward to that. And I know quite a few of our members are either going through the process or looking into it, and some I think we've got 2 at the moment who are B Corp certified. So that's really good. Any questions for Ian at all? Anyone like to raise a question? Harry?
Yes, Ian, thank you very much. Wonderful, as always.
Thank you.
One question about strategy, developing strategy.
Yeah.
In sessions, whether, it's a person on their own, a group or whatever, do you think there is a best kind of process for evolving strategy? I mean, should it be the CEO spending time thinking? Do you think it's better to have a senior team talking together and brainstorm? Is there a kind of process that you would suggest is likely to lead to a better strategy than another one?
Yeah, great question, Harry. I think 2 heads is better than 1 is where I'd start. I think there's a danger you go into a kind of vacuum and you just keep looking in the mirror and getting the same answers, the same questions. I've always been very fond of when I think I've got a good idea, let's bounce it off somebody else. So the first thing I say is yes. You're the CEO. If you're the CEO, then you call the ultimate shots. That's the thing, and you should be thinking it through before you get anyone else to discuss it with you. However, I would always have other people in the room because one thing I'm very fond of. There's a guy who wrote a book called Vivid Vision. His name might come to me. Cameron Herold is his name. And Cameron Herold wrote this book called Vivid Vision. And what he said is you should outline a vision for 3 years. That's the timeline. He's absolutely clear on that. A vision should be 3 years. Or you can disagree with it if you want, but that's what he says, 3 years. But his idea of a vision isn't a vision statement. It's several pages that write down what your business will look like in 3 years' time. So pick a date, 3 years' time, and say, I get up in the morning, I come into work, this is what it looked like. This is what turnover is, profit is, customers, partners, everything, products, you name it. You write a very, very descriptive, vivid vision of this is what it looks like in 3 years' time. Now, the beauty of that is, let's say you've got 3 people in your senior team, without conferring, ask them to do exactly the same thing. Ask them to write a vivid vision. So 3 years' time, what's it going to look like? And they'll find it really hard. Give them a week or so, and then all come together without any conferring before you come together and just say, right, now read them out. 1 or 2 pages of A4. Read it out. Where do you think we're going to be? And now I've done this. I did this with a group of 10, leadership team of 10 about 3 years ago. And it was astonishing. We had some people saying, because you can put anything in there as the headings you want, put turnover, EBITDA, profit, cash flow, customer groups, international markets we're going to be in, whatever you want. You can determine what you want to have in there. And they came up with, turnover between 5 and 30 million between them. It's like, wow, how did that happen? And different strategies, different markets. And then what you need to do is then obviously consolidate that as the CEO, or maybe with somebody supporting you to do that, and say, right, this is what's going to come out of this. Because of course, what comes out of that is the bare bones of your strategy and where you're going to go. So it gives you a real good input into the discussions of what are you going to do, where are you going to go, what EBITDA are you going to hit, what products are you going to come up with, what markets are you going to be in, whatever it is. And so I'm a big fan of involving people, but the CEO's got to have the ultimate say on this. And that process works well. It's messy. I always think strategy is messy, and that's okay, but you need to get off site. You need to have time. You need to think. You need to get people in a room. You need to do some environmental analysis as well. You need to think, well, what's our capability? What's our capacity? What are the competitors doing? Where's our USP coming from? What's missing in our business? So there's a lot of work to do around the strategy, obviously. And I can share some, process tips with Ollie afterwards. I can send some stuff through, which you can share, Ollie. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. It gives you a really good starting point.
Great. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. Any other questions whilst we got Ian with us? Well, I think we're going to be all right on questions now. I want to thank you. You're going to get a lot of love early next week from us on LinkedIn. Going to big you up, Ian.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for today. And always find it very inspirational. Always learn stuff. So thank you very much. Are you okay?